Life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards. Life is not a problem to be solved, but a reality to be experienced. Once you label me, you negate me. I see it all perfectly. There are two possible situations. One can either do this or that. My honest opinion and friendly advice is this: do it or do not do it. You will regret both. To dare is to lose one's footing momentarily. Not to dare is to lose oneself. How absurd men are! They never use the liberties they have. They demand those they do not have. They have freedom of thought. They demand freedom of speech. Far from idleness being the root of all evil, it is rather the only true good. If I am capable of grasping God objectively, I do not believe. But precisely because I cannot do this, I must believe. Purity of heart is to will one thing. During the first period of a man's life, the greatest danger is not to take the risk. Love does not alter the beloved, it alters itself. One can advise comfortably from a safe port. The truth is a snare. You cannot have it without being caught. You cannot have the truth in such a way that you catch it, but only in such a way that it catches you. Prayer does not change God, but it changes him who prays. The tyrant dies and his rule is over. The martyr dies and his rule begins. People demand freedom of speech as a compensation for the freedom of thought which they seldom use. Love is all, it gives all, and it takes all. The highest and most beautiful things in life are not to be heard about, nor read about, nor seen, but, if one will, are to be lived. Our life always expresses the result of our dominant thoughts. Most men pursue pleasure with such breathless haste that they hurry past it. Don't forget to love yourself. Anxiety is the dizziness of freedom. What is a poet? An unhappy person who conceals profound anguish in his heart, but whose lips are so formed that, as sighs and cries pass over them, they sound like beautiful music. God creates out of nothing. Wonderful, you say, yes, to be sure, but he does what is still more wonderful. He makes saints out of sinners. Face the facts of being what you are, for that is what changes what you are. Listen to the cry of a woman in labor at the hour of giving birth. Look at the dying man's struggle at his last extremity, and then tell me whether something that begins and ends thus could be intended for enjoyment. It belongs to the imperfection of everything human that man can enlighten his desire by passing through its opposite. Faith is the highest passion in a human being. Many in every generation may not come that far, but none comes further. The function of prayer is not to influence God, but rather to change the nature of the one who prays. Boredom is the root of all evil, the despairing refusal to be oneself. People understand me so poorly that they don't even understand my complaint about them not understanding me. Be that self which one truly is. There is nothing with which every man is so afraid as getting to know how enormously much he is capable of doing and becoming. the more a man can forget, the greater the number of metamorphoses which his life can undergo, the more he can remember, the more divine his life becomes. Life has its own hidden forces which you can only discover by living, not just in commerce, but in the world of ideas. To our age is putting on a veritable clearance sale. Everything can be had so dirt cheap that one begins to wonder whether in the end anyone will want to make a bid. Old age realizes the dreams of youth. Look at Dean Swift. In his youth he built an asylum for the insane. In his old age he was himself an inmate. A man who is a physical being is always turned toward the outside, thinking that his happiness lies outside him. Finally, turns inward and discovers that the source is within him. Marriage brings one into fatal connection with custom and tradition, and traditions and customs are like the wind and weather, altogether incalculable. Patience is necessary, and one cannot reap immediately where one has sown. Since boredom advances, and boredom is the root of all evil, no wonder, then, that the world goes backwards, that evil spreads. This can be traced back to the very beginning of the world. The gods were bored. Therefore they created human beings. The paradox is really the pathos of intellectual life, and just as only great souls are exposed to passions, it is only the great thinker who is exposed to what I call paradoxes, which are nothing else than grandiose thoughts in embryo. It is so hard to believe because it is so hard to obey. Since my earliest childhood, a barb of sorrow has lodged in my heart. As long as it stays, I am ironic. If it is pulled out, I shall die. It seems essential in relationships and all tasks that we concentrate only on what is most significant and important. Personality is only ripe when a man has made the truth his own. Take away paradox from the thinker and you have a professor. I feel as if I were a piece in a game of chess. When my opponent says of it, that piece cannot be moved. Just as in earthly life lovers long for the moment when they are able to breathe forth their love for each other, to let their souls blend in a soft whisper, so the mystic longs for the moment when in prayer he can, as it were, creep into God. At the bottom of enmity between strangers lies indifference.